Kevin Costner, a perpetual icon of American filmmaking, the resolute guardian in The Bodyguard, the visionary in Field of Dreams, and the audacious director who brought Dances with Wolves to life, forever reshaping Hollywood's narrative landscape. Emerging from the humble origins of Linwood, California, the son of a manual laborer and a compassionate social worker, his ascent was not paved by privilege, but by an unyielding spirit, unwavering conviction, and a profound belief in the resonance of human stories. He is more than an actor. He is a sculptor of emotion, a craftsman who distilled authenticity from quietude, transformed solitude into lyrical expression, and conjured realms where optimism and sorrow intertwined. Yet beneath that composed demeanor and proud bearing lies a spirit weathered by life's tempests, marked by 2 dissolved unions, 7 children from 3 different women, and the shattered remnants of love fractured by infidelity, consumed by legal battles, and burdened by losses that even accolades could not assuage. The thunderous applause could never fully silence the quiet that followed, nor could the blinding spotlight ever truly warm the chill of an empty dwelling. It is poignant to consider that the individual whose quiet strength would one day anchor the world began his journey in silence and obscurity. A vulnerable child adrift in uncertainty, striving for resilience long before he dared to dream. Kevin Michael Costner was born on the 18th of January 1955 in the sprawling sun-baked outskirts of Linwood, California. He was the youngest son of William Bill Costner, a man who transitioned from manual labor to the demanding role of a powerline technician, and Sharon Ray, a social worker whose eyes held a gentle warmth and whose hands bore the fatigue of her calling. Their existence was one of constant striving. The scent of oil and machinery clung to Bill's work attire, and his boots were perpetually coated in the very earth he toiled. His hands, calloused and etched with the marks of labor, communicated a story of hard work that needed no interpretation. Sharon would return each evening carrying the emotional weight of others' struggles in her gaze. Despite this, she would still find the energy to hum softly while preparing meals on a stove that offered more hiss than heat. Their home was modest, their aspirations contained. Yet, love, unspoken but steadfast, provided warmth against the harshness of winters that permeated the thin walls of their rented accommodations. Kevin learned early the significance of observing his father mend broken objects, be they machinery, fences, or spirits, and the quiet grace with which his mother bore her exhaustion. Within that small dwelling, survival was not a mere concept, but the very air they inhaled. However, beneath the veneer of comfort, an unspoken sorrow lingered, an undercurrent that never fully dissipated from the family dynamic. 2 years prior to Kevin's arrival in 1953, a profound tragedy had already struck their lives. His middle brother, Mark Douglas Costner, lived for a mere 24 hours before his infant heart ceased to beat. It was a silent bereavement that irrevocably altered the family's trajectory without a single word being uttered. From that point forward, love within the Costner household became an intensely protective and at times a somber force. Bill and Sharon carried their grief like an inseparable shadow. His father, driven by a newfound protectiveness, became more stringent, determined to shield his remaining sons from a world he now perceived as inherently perilous. His mother, while retaining her gentleness, grew more reserved, channeling her affection into prolonged gazes and thoughtful gestures. Occasionally, when Kevin was a child, he would find her standing motionless in the kitchen, her eyes fixed on an empty expanse of the room. Her expression held a mixture of tenderness, and an ineffable sadness, a silent testament to the child she had never had the chance to nurture. Bill would fall silent during these moments, his large hands gripping the table as if to physically anchor the family through sheer force of will. That unspoken void permeated their environment like a subtle yet persistent shadow. It was perhaps within this realm of unexpressed sorrow that Kevin first began to comprehend the profound nature of pain when it manifests not through tears, but through silence. By the age of 12, Kevin had already experienced more upheaval than many individuals do in an entire lifetime. The Costner family was in constant motion. Their residences shifted through Compton, Ventura, Visalia, and Orange County, each relocation a pursuit of employment and stability that remained perpetually elusive. Each move represented a small heartbreak, a new school, unfamiliar faces, and beginnings that were invariably short-lived. We were perpetually packing, perpetually restarting, he would later reflect. I learned to keep my inner world private. The abrasive sound of packing tape being torn across cardboard boxes became the defining auditory backdrop of his formative years. He was not the boisterous child nor the star athlete. He was the student whom teachers often overlooked, the quiet observer in the rear of the classroom who composed verses instead of offering answers. One evening, as yet another moving truck departed, Kevin sat in the back seat, watching the distant streetlights blur past like fleeting memories he was forbidden to retain. He shed no tears. He simply whispered a silent farewell to yet another community that had never truly known him. It was a form of cruelty uniquely characteristic of childhood, instilling the necessity of saying goodbye long before one comprehends the meaning of belonging. Yet from this quiet ache, a resilient core began to form. A conviction that even if the world remained oblivious to his presence, he possessed the capacity to construct something enduring. By his final years of secondary education, he had undergone significant growth, not merely in physical stature, but in emotional maturity. A late growth spurt finally brought him to 6 feet 1 inch. However, the most profound development occurred internally. The boy who had once resided in obscurity began to discover his own inner luminescence. Within the confines of church choirs, his voice trembled with a deep-seated yearning. During the night, he penned verses about the vastness of the sky and the prospect of renewed opportunities. He envisioned expansive landscapes, terrain that offered unwavering solidity beneath his feet, and narratives that would never require the indignity of being confined to cardboard boxes. His father's disciplined approach served as his guiding principle, and his mother's enduring faith provided his foundation. He would later articulate, "I suppose I became accustomed to starting anew." This statement transcended the mere act of relocating homes. It encapsulated his perspective on life itself. Every farewell had etched a deeper resilience within him, and every silence had compelled him to cultivate a more profound capacity for listening. He learned early on that life does not inherently offer comfort. It merely presents opportunities for a fresh beginning. And from these opportunities, Kevin Costner cultivated the courage to share stories capable of stirring the world's emotions, not through innate exceptionalism, but through the crucible of those quiet, unseen spaces where true greatness originates. What is the perceived value of a dream for a 23-year-old man, newly married, financially strained, and possessing a spirit too restless to conform? For Kevin Costner, the cost was absolute: security, predictability, and the understated satisfaction of a young man determined not to disappoint those he held dear. In 1978, having recently completed his studies at California State University, Fullerton, where he earned a degree in marketing and finance, he undertook the expected path of a dutiful son. He secured a stable employment opportunity. Each morning, he donned a crisp shirt, presented a cheerful facade to the world, and experienced a subtle diminishment of his inner self. The remuneration was consistent, his lifestyle predictable. However, the silence within him grew increasingly deafening. His true passion did not lie in financial figures, but in narratives, in the intangible realms that remained invisible to others. Somewhere amidst the rows of cubicles and the rhythmic hum of typewriters, he began to recognize that a life of safety was, in essence, a slow form of demise. Then destiny intervened, presenting itself in the likeness of Richard Burton. It was a routine flight returning from his honeymoon in Mexico. Ordinary, that is, until Kevin noticed the esteemed actor seated beside him. The atmosphere between them crackled with an almost palpable energy, as if fate itself had claimed a seat. With a tremor of nervousness, he confessed to Burton a long-held ambition, his desire to act, coupled with an apprehension about embarking on that path. Burton observed him, his gaze imbued with the depth of 1,000 performances, and simply stated, "You have green eyes, I have green eyes, I believe you will do just fine." Upon their arrival, Burton's limousine awaited him on the tarmac, while Kevin and his new wife stood in line for a bus. Burton leaned out of the window, the surrounding din momentarily receding, and uttered 2 words that would forever echo in Kevin's consciousness. "Good luck." That brief, fleeting encounter, lasting no longer than a single breath, irrevocably opened a portal within him. Within weeks, he resigned from his position. The world did not offer applause. Instead, it seemed to turn its back. He packed a single suitcase, donned a second-hand jacket, and piloted a worn-out Datsun toward Los Angeles with barely enough funds for gasoline. What ensued was not the romanticized struggle often depicted in narratives. It was a period marked by hunger, biting cold, and a pervasive, silent desperation. He took on odd jobs, scrubbing boats and driving delivery vans, while also guiding tours of celebrity residences, all the while harboring the private doubt of ever possessing a home of his own. Some nights, with his apartment's heating system failing, he would huddle fully clothed, whispering to himself, "Just one more day, just keep pushing forward." The pervasive scent of salt and diesel fuel seemed to cling to him. His hands became chapped and raw from manual labor. His pursuit was no longer for celebrity, but for sheer survival. Throughout this arduous period, he maintained contact with his family, his pride preventing him from revealing his struggles. Days dissolved into a hazy continuum of exhaustion and repeated rejections. He carried a worn folder of headshots, their edges softened by the perspiration of his hands. As he knocked on countless casting office doors that remained resolutely closed. "Leave your photo," they would invariably instruct, without even glancing in his direction. At times, he would walk for miles to conserve bus fare, his shoes wearing thin, his stomach a tight knot of persistent hunger. On dreary, rain-swept evenings, he would sit in his car parked outside studio gates, observing the stream of extras emerging under the bright lights, their laughter echoing through the mist, while he remained in the darkness unnoticed. Los Angeles had promised dreams. Instead, it offered an overwhelming silence. Yet, even within that silence, a resolute tenacity began to form, a quiet determination not to return home in defeat. Then one afternoon, a fellow student from his acting classes mentioned a small, low-budget production, a beach film in need of extras to fill the background. There was no payment, no guarantee of future work, simply an opportunity to be on a functioning film set. Kevin arrived barefoot, his hair bleached by the sun, his skin deeply tanned from the California heat. "We just need someone who will do the work," the director stated. Kevin simply nodded. It was the extent of his immediate response. When the camera finally focused on him, he felt a profound shift. It was not hope, but a fierce defiance. For a fleeting moment, the surrounding world faded away. It was solely him, the lens, and an unspoken vow to persist. His inaugural cinematic experience came with the film Sizzle Beach, USA, a production that nearly proved his undoing. It was cheap, awkward, and released years later against his wishes. It felt like a cruel jest. "I wished I could buy every copy and incinerate it," he would later admit. But the humiliation was only half the burden. The other half was the feeling of invisibility. For 6 arduous years, he endured a relentless cycle of auditions, only to be largely overlooked. Casting directors barely registered his presence, faces became a blur, doors slammed shut, and the once vibrant dream began to dim. He secured a part in The Big Chill, only to have every scene he performed excised from the final edit. He attended the premiere in solitude, his name absent from the credits, his faith hanging precariously by a thread. He was not merely financially depleted, he was effectively unseen. Nevertheless, he refused to yield. He dedicated his evenings to acting workshops, honing his ability to transform silence into authenticity and rejection into unwavering resilience. "Dreams do not open doors," he would later assert. "They merely provide the fortitude to continue knocking." And in 1985, when Lawrence Kasdan, the very director who had once omitted him from a film, extended an invitation for a new role in Silverado, Kevin Costner finally stepped into the spotlight. As the cameras rolled, the forgotten man from the periphery of Hollywood blazed across the screen with the intensity of someone who had awaited that singular moment their entire life. The ensuing acclaim was not a product of chance, but a testament to his perseverance. What is the essence of triumph when intermingled with exertion, doubt, and the gnawing fatigue of exhaustion? He did not gradually assimilate into Hollywood, he exploded onto the scene. A man who had once operated heavy machinery and meticulously cleaned boats now occupied the central focus of every cinematic frame, every prominent headline, and every collective aspiration. The world remained unaware that the most reticent individual it had once disregarded was poised to revolutionize the art of filmmaking. He had spent years mastering the discipline of surviving in silence, and now that silence finally articulated his story. When Silverado premiered in 1985, Kevin Costner's name was no longer a fleeting whisper. It resonated. He possessed a quickness, an undeniable magnetism, and a disarming authenticity, an on-screen presence that felt less like acting and more like genuine truth captured on film. 2 years later, in The Untouchables, he embodied American integrity. His portrayal exuded quiet valor, unwavering moral conviction, and a man who maintained his composure amidst chaos. The film garnered over $100 million at the box office. However, what Kevin gained was far more precious: respect. For the first time, his struggle was not to be noticed, but to live up to the expectations that had been placed upon him. With Bull Durham in 1988 and Field of Dreams a year later, he indelibly etched his name into the very fabric of American cinema. When he stood amidst that cornfield, uttering the iconic line, "If you build it, he will come," audiences felt a direct connection, as if he was speaking to each of them individually, to everyone who had ever invested in something with unwavering faith and patiently awaited a miracle. By 1990, at the age of 35, Kevin no longer contented himself with merely acting. He aspired to create. he personally mortgaged his assets, established TIG Productions, and embarked on the ambitious endeavor of producing Dances with Wolves. Hollywood decried it as folly, a 3-hour Western filmed in the Lakota language. They labeled it professional suicide. Studio executives implored him to shorten the extended silent passages, but he steadfastly refused. That quietude, he argued, is where genuine insight resides. He intended for the film to give voice to those historically marginalized and to underscore the multiplicity of truths. The production budget escalated to $22 million. Severe weather destroyed sets, actors withdrew from the project, and he spent solitary nights in a frigid trailer, plagued by the apprehension that he might have irrevocably jeopardized his career for a vision that lacked widespread belief. Upon its eventual release, the film did not merely achieve success, it achieved transcendence. Dances with Wolves grossed $424 million, garnered 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, and propelled the boy from Linwood into the ranks of Hollywood's most influential figures. Yet, amidst the resounding applause, he remained grounded, quietly admitting, "I didn't trust myself." The auditorium reverberated with cheers, but for him, it was merely the familiar silence, the same silence he had known from the outset. The subsequent years witnessed a whirlwind of triumphs and profound fatigue. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, released in 1991, generated $390 million. Nevertheless, critics derided his accent. He maintained a professional smile for the cameras, but the clamor of adulation was beginning to feel like an oppressive burden. In that same year, he accepted a role in Oliver Stone's JFK, a politically charged and controversial film that challenged his courage beyond the confines of performance. The movie dared to question the very foundations of governmental authority, and headlines branded him as reckless. Kevin remained unfazed. He posited that any discourse exploring potential truths can only serve to liberate us. Then came The Bodyguard in 1992. He waited a full year for Whitney Houston to accept the role and forwent a $10 million salary in exchange for a share of the film's profits. It was a calculated risk, one that only a man who had previously meticulously counted coins for gasoline could afford to take. And the gamble yielded unprecedented returns. The film grossed $411 million. Its accompanying soundtrack sold over 50 million copies, and Kevin's earnings exceeded $20 million. By 1993, he ranked among Hollywood's highest-paid individuals, commanding $10 million per film. A remarkable ascent for someone who had once slept beside a frigid radiator, murmuring himself to sleep. However, the cost was significant. Colleagues observed that he barely slept, managing film sets by day and overseeing editing by night. "Success can be more isolating than failure," he confided. "When everyone assures you that you are correct, you begin to question if that is truly the case." Then came the downturn. Waterworld, released in 1995, was anticipated to be his next monumental success. Instead, it nearly consumed him, quite literally. Hurricanes devastated the meticulously constructed sets. Production expenses ballooned to an astronomical $235 million, and he narrowly escaped a fatal incident while tied to a mast during filming. The press subjected him to relentless ridicule, coining the film Kevin's Gate. His subsequent project, The Postman, released in 1997, fared even more disastrously, sweeping the Razzie Awards for Worst Picture, Actor, and Director. The same hands that had once cradled Academy Awards now trembled over overdue invoices. Yet, even in that dire circumstance, he did not cast blame upon the world nor retreat into complacency. He returned to work, focusing on smaller-scale projects, more introspective narratives and westerns that other filmmakers eschewed. He understood the process of starting anew. He had been doing it his entire life. "I have never been apprehensive about commencing again," he stated. And perhaps that is the most accurate measure of true greatness. Not the thunderous roar of applause, but the inner fortitude to rise once the applause subsides. Because Kevin Costner was never driven by a pursuit of fame, he was driven by a quest for authenticity. And authenticity, much like himself, possesses an inherent resilience that prevents it from remaining subdued for long. What transpires when the world ceases its adulation and only the sound of one's own respiration remains? The tempests had abated, but they had left him feeling profoundly depleted. Following the period of intense turmoil, Kevin Costner did not require media attention to comprehend his decline. He felt it in the silence, in the dormant telephone that no longer rang, in rooms that had once been thronged with activity, now starkly empty. Hollywood, which had once bestowed upon him its highest honors, now seemed to look past him. For the first time in decades, there were no cameras, no scripts, only the insidious whisper of self-doubt. "I was not broken," he would later articulate. "I was emptied, and it is in that state that one discovers what is genuine." The media dissected him, labeling him a relic of the 90s, satirizing his perceived vanity and ego. He offered no denials. "You cannot respond to every falsehood," he remarked. "You simply endure longer than they do." Fame, which had once filled him, now served only as an echo. He could subsist without applause, but not without a sense of purpose. And for a considerable period, he had been bereft of both. On certain nights, his body ached as intensely as his heart. The cumulative weight of years spent pursuing dreams seemed to press down upon his very bones. Nevertheless, he refused to remain inactive. There was still something left to convey. In Aspen, the snow arrived early that year, softening the landscape but not the intensity of his thoughts. The fire burned low, the silence oppressive. At times, he would venture out for solitary hikes, his boots crunching through the fresh snowdrifts, questioning not why the world had turned its back, but why he had craved its approval so intensely. It was not bitterness, he discovered, but a profound clarity. Perhaps one must experience a fall to truly understand the act of rising. One morning, he observed the snow effortlessly erasing his footprints and experienced a sense of peace for the first time. That winter, he recommenced his writing, not in pursuit of accolades, but to recapture the essence of the creative process. From that period of quiet reflection emerged Open Range in 2003, a modest western that prioritized emotional depth over grand spectacle. It achieved $68 million in revenue against a production budget of $26 million. However, its most significant contribution was the restoration of his artistic voice. "Authenticity does not necessitate loudness," he commented. "It merely requires time. Fame teaches us how to ascend, adversity teaches us how to persevere." When Yellowstone debuted in 2018, his quiet determination resonated with immense force. At 63 years of age, Costner embodied John Dutton, the weary patriarch of a sprawling ranching empire, a man fiercely committed to safeguarding what is irreplaceable. "I do not portray heroes," he stated. "I portray men who strive." This humility resonated deeply across America. Yellowstone rapidly ascended to become cable television's most watched drama, attracting an audience of 16 million viewers. By the fifth season, His per-episode earnings reached $1.3 million, a testament not to mere celebrity, but to sustained endurance. However, financial figures were never his ultimate metric. Purpose was. On set, he continued to rise before dawn, his boots already dusted, meticulously refining dialogue between takes. He once advised a young actor, "You cannot feign the truth reflected in a man's eyes." And beyond the realm of television, another deeply held ambition stirred, one that refused to be extinguished: Horizon. An American saga had been a persistent vision within him since 1988, a concept too robust to fade. Studios deemed it excessively long, too understated, and prohibitively expensive. Nevertheless, Kevin proceeded, leveraging his own home as collateral and investing $38 million of his personal funds. "If it fails," he declared, "it fails with my name affixed to it." On location in the stark Utah desert, the sun bled across the horizon as Kevin stood near the camera. The wind whipped through his coat, and exhaustion was etched across his features. "Keep rolling," he murmured, his voice raspy but unwavering. "We will achieve it." He was not in pursuit of flawlessness, but of an authentic representation. When the inaugural chapter premiered at Cannes in 2024, critical reception was divided. Yet Kevin offered a serene smile. He was not seeking validation. He was upholding a commitment. The film's box office performance fell short of its production costs, grossing a mere $38.7 million. However, the true dividend was the reaffirmation of his artistic conviction. That evening, as the house lights dimmed, he stood alone at the rear of the theater. The final image glowed across his face, a man witnessing not solely a personal triumph, but a profound declaration of his life's work. At 70 years of age, Kevin Costner stands at a unique vantage point, not at the pinnacle of achievement, but having transcended it. He has transmuted adversity into a lasting legacy, dedicated labor into a form of devotion, and silence into a melodic expression. Ultimately, he has not merely produced films, he has instilled profound meaning. It is a cruel twist of fate when affection arrives like the sun, only to recede like a tempest. When Kevin Costner encountered Cindy Silver in the year 1975 at California State University, Fullerton, he was a 20-year-old adrift, harboring aspirations far beyond his current grasp. She, on the other hand, possessed a captivating radiance, an aspiring actress whose gaze held an almost childlike capacity for belief. Their meeting occurred between lectures, two nascent souls exchanging lightheartedness for bolstered resolve. She characterized him as the introspective one, the young man who seemed perpetually distant, pursuing unseen narratives. 3 years later, in 1978, they exchanged vows, armed with little more than a borrowed ring and the audacious optimism of youth, professing that their union would be their ultimate wealth. Their inaugural dwelling carried the scent of fresh paint and unyielding optimism. Their furnishings were salvaged from curbsides, and their evenings were warmed by inexpensive wine and endless conversations about aspirations of someday. She toiled through double shifts, while he navigated the congested arteries of Los Angeles in pursuit of auditions that frequently culminated in disappointment, always returning to her encouraging refrain, "Don't give up." With the arrival of Annie in 1984, followed by Lily in 1986, and finally Joe in 1988, he found himself weeping at the hospital with each birth, clutching their minuscule fingers and vowing to construct a world befitting their existence. For a period, he succeeded. There were idyllic picnics, tender lullabies, and cherished family portraits bathed in the California sunshine. These moments were so luminous they seemed plucked from a dream. He once reflected, Cindy had faith in me before anyone else, and that conviction propelled every endeavor. However, triumph has a voracious appetite, consuming the very elements that nourish it. The Untouchables, Field of Dreams, Dances with Wolves. Each cinematic creation indelibly etched his name into Hollywood's annals. Yet with every accolade, a subtle void grew within their home. Fame descended like an inundation. The man who once returned home carrying the aroma of paint now exuded the essence of distant locales and studio illumination. She endured missed birthdays and holidays, blurred by the disorientation of jet lag, raising 3 children in Ventura while perusing magazine articles about her husband that she never purchased. As he stood beneath the resplendent glow of the 1991 Academy Awards, impeccably attired, his heart ached with emptiness. Cindy was at home with their slumbering offspring, observing his triumph through a screen that felt as frigid as glass. Trust, he would later articulate, does not shatter instantaneously. It gradually erodes like daylight at twilight. They endeavored to mend their bond. He strategically interspersed breaks between filming schedules. They sought therapeutic guidance, seeking refuge in secluded cabins, hoping to rediscover the sound of shared laughter, but the chasm had already taken root. Murmurs of clandestine late-night encounters and on-set dalliances circulated. Though unverified, these whispers had a corrosive effect. The woman who once anticipated his every word now spoke in hushed tones to preserve her composure. And the man who had once pledged eternal devotion began to realize he no longer recognized the path leading back home. Success, he conceded, can be a more isolating companion than failure, and somewhere amidst the transient spaces of airports and red carpet events, forever quietly ceased to exist. In 1994, following a 16-year partnership, they initiated divorce proceedings, citing irreconcilable differences. The initial settlement negotiations were arduous. Cindy's legal representatives reportedly sought an astonishing $160 million, a figure stemming not from avarice, but from profound heartache and perceived betrayal. After months of strained silence and legal wrangling, they reached an accord amounting to approximately $80 million, a sum equivalent to about $150 million in today's economic landscape. There had been no prenuptial agreement, only an edifice of trust. She retained the family residence in California and primary custody of their children. He kept his production company and the disquieting burden of his immense success. You will only see the people you cherish most, your children, half as often, he articulated, his voice breaking during an interview that continues to haunt him. That night, as the legal documents were finalized, he meticulously packed boxes labeled family, movies, and memories. They shared one final repast. There were no accusations, no raised voices, only profound exhaustion. 2 hands instinctively reached for the same glass, only to halt mid-air, a silent acknowledgement that habit was the sole remaining connection. Outside the window, camera flashes erupted like distant thunder. Within, the silence was deafening. Hollywood branded it one of the most financially devastating divorces of its era. For them, it signified the demise of a life once meticulously constructed from love. Cindy retreated from public scrutiny. Kevin immersed himself in his work, convinced that constant activity would assuage his profound sense of loss. Yet, each new role, each subsequent premiere felt like a penance. He could reconstruct his fame, but not the joyful sounds of 3 children echoing within a shared home. Years later, long after the clamor had subsided and his hair had adopted the hue of winter, he drove back to their former abode in Ventura. the once vibrant garden had vanished. The paint was peeling, but the wind still rustled the curtains, just as it had in their younger days. He stood at the threshold where she had once awaited his return, hearing the spectral echo of her laughter and the phantom patter of small feet down a hallway that no longer existed. In that poignant moment, the man who had conquered the world glimpsed the boy he once was, lost, hopeful, and perhaps nearing forgiveness. "Home," he whispered, "is not a place. It is the time you cannot reclaim." Within that profound stillness lay every lesson he had expiated through silence. That affection does not perish from anger, but from neglect. That achievements are hollow when they come at the cost of those who were once your most ardent supporters. And that true prosperity is measured by time invested, not by wealth accumulated. Kevin and Cindy chose grace amidst the wreckage, co-parenting without rancor, attending graduation side by side, eternally linked by the faces that bore their shared likeness. Their narrative remains the most profoundly human chapter within his celebrated saga. The interplay of sunlight and tempest, the ascent and the downfall, stands as testament that even the most incandescent love can fracture, yet still leave behind something sacred. 2 years elapsed following the tempest, and the ensuing silence became a solitary companion. Kevin Costner dedicated himself to relentless work, filming, traveling, and engaging with the press. But when the spotlights dimmed, the only sound he registered was the rhythmic cadence of his own breathing. He was embarking on the arduous journey of rediscovering how to live, though the very air still seemed to carry the faint scent of something irrevocably broken. The man who had once embraced the concept of forever now navigated life with deliberate caution, as if apprehensive of touching anything fragile again. Then, in 1996, when he least anticipated it, a gentle presence entered his quiet existence. Bridget Rooney, a woman of grace and understated intelligence, an heiress to the Pittsburgh Steelers legacy, raised in privilege, yet possessing a disarming kindness. They crossed paths at a charitable event in Aspen, where laughter mingled with the soft glow of snow and the clinking of champagne glasses. She inquired if he still held faith in happiness. A near confession flickered across his features as he smiled. "I still believe," he admitted. "I just don't know if I deserve it any longer." Their connection was brief but genuine. Two individuals finding each other not in pursuit of fame or distraction, but in a shared search for understanding. She perceived the man beyond the sensational headlines, and for a fleeting instant, he remembered the sensation of warmth. From this understated interlude emerged something enduring. A son, Liam Timothy Costner, born in 1996. Upon the dissemination of this news, Hollywood's characteristic clamor turned toward their story. However, Kevin met the situation with forthrightness. Initial uncertainty pervaded, but a DNA test subsequently confirmed what their hearts had already discerned. He immediately assumed responsibility, establishing a trust fund and ensuring complete financial provision, determined that his child would never experience the void of paternal absence he himself had known too acutely. "I will not allow him to grow up questioning his significance," he confided to a close associate. "That is not a lesson any child should have to learn." For Kevin, this situation transcended mere scandal or damage control. It was a matter of conscience. For the first time since the dissolution of his marriage, he was engaged in building something not for public consumption, but for the quiet legacy of a single life that would bear his name. Their romantic entanglement did not endure for an extended duration. By 1998, they had amicably parted ways. Crucially, their separation unfolded without animosity or the ostentatious display that so frequently accompanies the dissolution of relationships involving public figures. There were no sensational tabloid reports, no public accusations, merely two individuals who had shared a moment of sincerity and recognized its natural conclusion. Bridget, who would later marry businessman William Coe, continued to speak of Kevin with genuine warmth, acknowledging his steadfast commitment as a father. Kevin, in turn, upheld his promise, visiting Liam, sending gifts, and appearing at significant life events, always with a quiet sense of pride. He never transformed the boy into a media spectacle. Instead, he allowed him to mature in an atmosphere of tranquility. "I've generated enough noise for several lifetimes," he would later remark softly. It is beneficial that he has the opportunity to experience silence. That brief romantic interlude was not a source of scandal, but rather a quiet act of redemption, a lesson articulated in understated terms following a life lived in bold capitals for Kevin Costner. Bridget Rooney was not merely another chapter of heartbreak, but a gentle reminder that affection can still arrive unbidden, without explicit promises, and leave behind a lasting legacy. Liam became the living proof that not all consequences are punitive. Some are precious gifts wrapped in the mantle of responsibility. And within that sense of responsibility, Kevin discovered a more serene form of grace. The storm had passed, but in its aftermath, a new light emerged, no longer blinding, but sufficient to illuminate the path ahead and the man he continued to evolve into. He had believed the most formidable storms had weathered their course, that after decades of emotional turmoil and diligent reconstruction, life would finally bestow upon him a measure of peace. When Kevin Costner met Christine Baumgartner, it was not with the impetuous ardor of youth, but with the quiet hope of a man who had already experienced loss and gained wisdom. She was 20 years his junior, possessed of a graceful demeanor and self-assured confidence, a model and handbag designer whose serene steadiness provided a counterbalance to the restless drive that had propelled him for much of his adult life. They initially crossed paths in 1998, but drifted apart in 2002 when she expressed a yearning for children, a prospect he was hesitant to revisit. However, destiny, with its patient persistence, orchestrated their reunion. "I couldn't bear to lose her over that," he would later confess. When they exchanged vows on September 25, 2004, at his cherished ranch in Aspen, it was more than a wedding. It was a homecoming. White tents shimmered under the mountain sun, horses grazed peacefully beyond the makeshift altar, and the air was imbued with the scent of pine and burgeoning promise. Christine arrived in a horse-drawn carriage, her smile trembling with profound joy. Kevin awaited her beneath a canopy of delicate lights, his eyes glistening, whispering to a friend, "I never thought I would have this chance again." For nearly 2 decades, they cultivated what appeared to be a terrestrial paradise. 3 children, Caden Wyatt, born in 2007, Hayes Logan in 2009, and Grace Avery in 2010, transformed his ranch into a veritable fairy tale. He constructed snow forts with them during Colorado winters and chased them barefoot along the sun-drenched shores of Santa Barbara in the summers. There were leisurely barbecues by the lake, impromptu movie nights complete with popcorn and sleeping bags, and whispered bedtime stories recounted by the very voice that had once commanded Hollywood's grandest stages. For the first time in many years, he was not portraying a hero, he was embodying one. "This," he once remarked in an interview, "is what I was striving for all along." He observed Christine, patient, radiant, and practical, and believed he had found the soul destined to guide him gently into his twilight years. He accepted fewer acting roles, dedicating more of his attention to directing and developing his production company, Horizon, as a lasting legacy for his children. For a man who had spent an inordinate amount of time navigating airports and hotel rooms, the harmonious sound of laughter at the dinner table was infinitely more rewarding than any applause. It felt enduring, a triumphant second act that no script could possibly mar. Yet sometimes paradise does not combust, it erodes. It begins with missed breakfasts, averted gazes, and the quiet closure of bedroom doors. By the early 2000s, professional demands began to encroach upon the spaces once occupied by love. The demanding schedule of Yellowstone necessitated months away from home. Horizon, his ambitious film venture, steadily depleted his savings, his time, and gradually his inner peace. Christine, left to manage the household, began to feel increasingly invisible within a life that the outside world envied. She continued to set the table for 5, even on evenings when he was unable to return home. "He's always gone," a friend once quoted her, lamenting. "I missed the simple things, coffee, breakfast, a day with no itinerary." She craved his presence while he offered stability. Their love, starved of consistent attention, began to thin into silence, not the kind that erupts in shouts, but a low hum, like a distant, ominous warning. Then came the thunderclap, May 2023, when she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. He was on set, standing beneath a vast western sky that he himself had conjured from humble beginnings, when the legal papers arrived. The crew observed him freeze, script pages still clutched in his hand, his gaze fixed on the signature that marked the end of 19 years of unwavering belief. "It felt," he later confided, "as though the ground had vanished from beneath me." What followed was not a quiet unraveling between two weary hearts, but a public spectacle. A wildfire of legal filings, accusations, financial figures, and heartbreak meticulously quantified by spreadsheets. The headlines trumpeted astronomical sums, yet none acknowledged the most profound loss of all: 3 children awakening in separate residences, awaiting the comforting sound of a father's voice that now arrived only through the mediation of a telephone. A prenuptial agreement, meticulously crafted and undeniably binding, ensured that the conclusion would be a matter of business rather than emotion. Christine's legal team sought an exorbitant $248,000 per month for child support. The court ultimately reduced this figure to $63,000, but no numerical value could truly encapsulate the magnitude of what had been irrevocably lost. Under the terms of the prenup, she was mandated to vacate their Santa Barbara home, the very house where each of their children had taken their first unsteady steps and experienced their initial dips in the ocean. Neighbors recounted how, on the day of her departure, the curtains fluttered like departing wings. Kevin returned home that evening to rooms faintly scented with her perfume and the sea air. And for the first time in years, he recognized that silence possesses a distinct aroma. Weeks later, a particularly cruel blow landed. Photographs emerged of Christine strolling along the coast with Josh Connor, a man Kevin had once considered a friend. They had shared meals, laughter, and mutual trust, and now these tabloid images sent his world into a disorienting spiral. Proof of nothing tangible, yet a source of immense emotional pain. For a man who had built his career on principles of loyalty, this felt like a profound betrayal, seemingly belonging to a past era. Yet here it was, intruding upon the present he still cherished. "I never wanted this," he confided quietly to friends. "I still love her, but some things you simply cannot unsee." For the second time in his life, he found himself dividing a world he had painstakingly constructed by hand. This time, however, it was not wealth that was halved, but the laughter of his children, now fractured between residences, divided weekends, and lingering silences. Their union had endured for nearly 19 years, and those years did not relinquish their hold quietly. She fought to safeguard her children's comfort, while he endeavored to shield their innocence. She asserted that the marriage had become a source of profound loneliness. He maintained that his efforts had been directed toward providing for them. Standing between them were their 3 children, and the spectral presence of what had once been perfect. By the latter part of 2023, the court had rendered its judgment. By the beginning of 2024, their union was legally dissolved. The prenup held firm, but so did the gnawing ache. The first time he confided to an intimate acquaintance, he had lost half his fortune. This time, he had lost half his heart. On set, he persisted with filming amidst the unfolding storm, directing Horizon while his own personal horizon crumbled behind him. Fame had never felt so utterly hollow. He had once been the protector, the bodyguard who vowed to keep others safe. Now he was the one left exposed, bleeding silently behind the lens. Years from now, what will endure are not the meticulous legal filings, but the quiet vignettes of a life once whole. A father in a trailer, script pages trembling in his hands as the desert wind buffets the walls. A kitchen light left burning in Santa Barbara with no one home to extinguish it. A suitcase being carried across a stone driveway as 3 children watch from a window, too young to comprehend how something so complete could simply end without a definitive antagonist. From the depths of this silence arises a truth more profound than fame, that no individual, regardless of their power, can escape the labor of love. That accomplishment cannot substitute for genuine presence, that certain losses impart lessons that triumphs can never convey. And when the years stretch out long and quiet, the numbers will invariably tell their own story. 7 children, 3 mothers, and a single heart that persistently sought to forge a unified home from them all. It was never about the multitude of lives he influenced, but the depth of his commitment to remain present in each. Kevin Costner will continue to co-parent, to attend school plays and birthday celebrations, to honor his commitments in the subtle yet significant ways that truly matter. Because love, when authentic, transcends mere signatures. It evolves into duty, then memory, and finally into grace. In the unfolding narrative of Kevin Costner, this was not merely another heartbreak. It was the downfall of a man who once constructed worlds, only to learn he could not preserve his own. It was the tempest that stripped him bare, leaving him with nothing but his faith. And it was the chapter that taught him that even after erecting horizons for everyone else, the only one that ultimately holds significance is the one reflected in the eyes of his children. And at times, it takes betrayal, not death, to remind us that even angels can turn away, and that the greatest strength lies in continuing to love in their absence. What remains when the spotlights dim, when the applause ceases, and when fate quietly reclaims nearly everything once held dear? For Kevin Costner, the answer was never found in the thunderous roar of the box office, but in the quiet obligation of love. He felt a debt to his parents, Bill and Sharon, the two individuals who shaped him long before Hollywood ever bestowed upon him a name. They were unassuming people, Bill and Sharon Costner, who sought not the world's accolades, but its inherent decency. They raised their sons in modest homes, redolent of soap and diligent effort, where the simple act of folding a paycheck on the kitchen table held more significance than any standing ovation. His father, Bill, toiled diligently, digging ditches and repairing power lines, returning each evening with the dust of his labor on his hair and an unyielding faith in his hands. His mother, Sharon, dedicated her days to listening to the sorrows of others as a social worker, ensuring her own family never lacked for tenderness. From them, Kevin absorbed two foundational lessons that would profoundly influence his life's trajectory: that labor itself is sacred, and that kindness, however understated, leaves an indelible resonance that outlives us. Yet for all the narratives he would recount, the one he could never fully complete was their own. When his mother fell gravely ill, he was far away, relentlessly pursuing the dream for which they had made such profound sacrifices. Hollywood was a cacophony of roaring success, premieres, contracts, cameras flashing, but her voice, a small, steady beacon, cut through the din like a prayer. "You're doing well," she told him once over the phone. "Just remember to rest." He promised he would, tragically unaware that this would be the final vow he would ever make to her. When the news arrived, he was on set, the lights blindingly intense, the surrounding noise overwhelming. "She's gone," someone whispered. He remained motionless, his hands trembling around the script she had encouraged him to pursue. He did not arrive in time to hold her hand. He was denied the final words that only mothers reserve for their sons. At her funeral, he stood between his brothers, attempting to project an image of bravery for the woman who had spent her entire life bravely confronting the challenges of everyone else. "She carried the burdens of others so they wouldn't have to," he said, quietly. Perhaps she carried too much. He harbored the hope that grief might eventually loosen its grip. But 2 years later, it returned with a vengeance, closer and more devastating. His father, Bill, followed her into the profound silence, as if one heart could not bear to beat independently of the other. The news arrived in the early hours of the morning. Kevin sat alone in a hotel room, his phone still illuminated by the words that shattered him for a second time. He had missed his mother's final moments. And now he would also miss his father's. "It's the curse of distance," he once reflected. "You strive for everything you believe will make them proud, and when you finally achieve it, they are no longer there." At the funeral, the air was thick with the earthy scent of rain and freshly cut grass. He gazed down at the casket, his thoughts returning to the hands that had constructed every fence, fashioned every toy, and meticulously built the very foundation of the man he had become. "He never sought recognition," Kevin whispered. "Only honesty. I hope I have earned some of his pride." That night, long after everyone else had departed, he remained seated in his car, headlights extinguished, the dashboard light casting flickering shadows across his face. There were no cameras, no audience, just a son grappling with the realization that the two individuals who had steadfastly anchored his world were now gone. The profound loss of them in such close succession created a hollow emptiness within him. He possessed fame, wealth, and countless faces smiling from movie posters. Yet suddenly, none of it held any weight. "When your parents are gone," he once observed, "the world feels fundamentally different. You become your own parent." Perhaps this is why, in the intervening years, his films adopted a more gentle tone, exploring themes of fatherhood and sonship, of lingering goodbyes, of land, time, and forgiveness. He ceased chasing the clamor and began to attune himself once more to the quiet rhythm his parents had once embodied, the silence that signified work, love, and presence. Occasionally, he journeys to the ranch, standing under the vast expanse of sky where they once shared their aspirations, and softly utters a sentiment they would have grasped. "I accomplished this, yet not without you." The rationale is straightforward. The world imparted to him the means to excel, but his parents instilled in him the profound reason for its significance. And when the clamor of accolades subsides, it is their voices that still resonate within him. The steady, low sound of a father's melody, the gentle murmur of a mother's plea, serving as a reminder that every narrative worth recounting originates and concludes at the sanctuary of home. The global consciousness recalls the moment Whitney Houston departed from us, the urgent news flashes, the ensuing hush, the pervasive sense of disbelief that enveloped the planet. She was merely 48 years of age, tragically premature for life's cessation, too deeply cherished to be relegated to oblivion. For the collective world, it signified the forfeiture of an unparalleled voice. However, for Kevin Costner, it represented the depletion of something far more subdued and infinitely more hallowed, a confidant and inspiration, a delicate spirit he had once pledged to safeguard. Their initial encounter occurred in 1991 at a time when Hollywood already perceived him as an unyielding presence, and the wider world regarded her as an unattainable icon. Yet the isolation inherent in prominence is adept at concealment. Perhaps this very reason allowed them to recognize a kindred spirit in each other instantaneously. Two souls who comprehended the immense weight that comes with striving for flawlessness. The Bodyguard was initially conceived as merely another romantic thriller. However, when Kevin's gaze met Whitney's across the table, observing her hands tremble as she held the script, something fundamentally altered. Studio executives were disinclined to cast her. She possessed no prior acting experience. Concerns were voiced that a black female superstar alongside a white male lead might alienate viewers. Kevin remained steadfast in his refusal to compromise. "She is the one," he asserted to them. "If she agrees, I will patiently await her readiness, no matter the duration." And he did, enduring 1 full year until she felt prepared. The moment she graced the set, radiating a shy yet captivating aura, he embodied the protector he would later portray on screen, her safeguard. He meticulously noted her positions on stage, offered light-hearted remarks to ease her apprehension, and provided encouragement after each take. He later recounted her initial nervousness, but also her inherent magic. During interludes between scenes, they engaged in lengthy conversations about their spiritual beliefs, their familial ties, and the dual nature of fame, which could be both a blessing and a burden. She referred to him as her haven of security. He, in turn, called her the marvel he was privileged to protect, and when the cameras began to roll, that profound trust, so delicate and wordless, transcended mortality. Upon the premiere of The Bodyguard in 1992, the world collectively paused to absorb its impact. The iconic image of Kevin carrying Whitney through the downpour became legendary. The film garnered over $400 million in revenue, but it was Whitney's exquisitely resonant voice, delivering "I Will Always Love You," that cemented its place in eternal remembrance. That song transcended its role as mere soundtrack music. It served as a revelation, a foresight, a vow. The public perceived an undeniable chemistry. Kevin witnessed sheer bravery. He would later remark, "She made the entire world feel secure for 4 minutes." However, the years marched onward. The pervasive influence of fame exacted its toll. The headlines grew increasingly somber. The inherent radiance began to wane. Kevin observed from a distance a mixture of pride and helplessness washing over him. He witnessed Whitney battling adversaries that no one else could confront on her behalf. "People tend to forget," he once observed, "that behind every vocal performance lies an individual striving to maintain their fortitude." Then the fateful call arrived, February 11th, 2012. He was in California when the words "No heart was prepared for this" were uttered. Whitney Houston was no more. She was discovered alone in a hotel suite in Beverly Hills mere hours before a pre-Grammy event she had eagerly anticipated. Dreams left incomplete, ventures in the planning stages, a rumored comeback on the horizon, and then an abrupt silence. The light extinguished, the world fractured, news presenters faltered over her name, tears welling mid-sentence. Outside places of worship, admirers ignited candles, thousands of tiny flames flickering like a mournful chorus. Radios played her compositions incessantly, each rendition of "I Will Always Love You" punctuated by a broken voice struggling with that unattainable note. In New York, London, Seoul, and Lagos, people stood motionless. It was not solely the loss of a singer, it was the demise of an epoch, the vanishing of the untainted spirit that her voice had once embodied. Kevin sat in solitude for extended periods, his gaze fixed on nothingness. "Are you certain?" was all he could manage to whisper. Later he reflected that it felt as if a guiding light toward which he had been journeying his entire life had been extinguished. When her funeral was announced for February 18th, 2012, at the New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, the very place where she had first offered her gospel melodies as a child. He was invited to deliver a eulogy that evening. He penned his remarks by lamplight, frequently pausing, allowing memories to blur the ink. On the day of the service, he stood before her coffin, the cameras broadcasting his presence to millions. His voice quivered. "Whitney," he began softly, "you were not merely adequate, you were extraordinary." He spoke of her persistent fear of inadequacy, of how he had perpetually believed she possessed far more potential than she ever recognized. "The world harbored doubts about your readiness for The Bodyguard," he stated. "But I was ready. I always had faith in you." He then paused, his eyes glistening with tears, and delivered the line that shattered the collective heart of the world. "And I will always love you." The musical accompaniment ceased. Even the very air seemed to suspend its movement. It was a farewell that no director could have meticulously scripted. Beyond the confines of the church, the streets of Newark were thronged with mourners. Some softly sang her melodies, while others simply wept. In that moment, the world, transcending divisions of race, language, and geographical distance, grieved as one unified entity. For days, admirers congregated at the locations where she had once performed, laying down floral tributes, photographs, and heartfelt letters. They were not merely mourning a vocalist, they were lamenting the individuals they had been when her songs first offered them solace. Kevin eschewed viewing the televised coverage, remaining at home with the lights dimmed, the resonance of the church service still echoing within his chest. In the ensuing years, he seldom spoke of her. On one occasion, he quietly admitted, "I regret that I couldn't be there when she needed someone to shield her once more." His companions disclosed that whenever I Will Always Love You played on the radio, he would reach out and adjust the dial, not as an act of denial, but out of profound respect, akin to leaving a chamber where a beloved individual is still asleep. When the film reached its 30th anniversary in 2022, he finally broke his silence. The film succeeded because her heart was genuine, he stated. Perhaps that was the very essence he had always hoped people would remember. Not the celebrity, not the downfall, but the inherent goodness of her spirit. For the global populace, Whitney Houston's passing marked the conclusion of a voice capable of uplifting congregations and mending broken hearts. For Kevin Costner, it signified the dissolution of a cherished pledge, the lingering echo of a bond forged through unwavering belief, steadfast loyalty, and the conviction that even beauty requires safeguarding. She departed prematurely, her aspirations unfulfilled, and her songs yet unsung. Nevertheless, her voice continues to traverse the celestial expanse, a testament to the fact that certain lights merely extinguish on earth to perpetually radiate elsewhere. And if you listen with attentive ears, amidst the musical phrases you can still discern him whispering, "I believed in you," followed by, "I still believe in you." The passage of time, with its insidious creeping into joints, its theft of steady hands, and its transformation of even joyous occasions into arduous struggles, can only be truly grasped by those who have crossed the threshold of 70 years. For Kevin Costner, age is more than a mere chronological marker. It represents an internal conflict waged silently beneath the surface of his skin, a daily confrontation between resolute willpower and encroaching exhaustion, between the indomitable flame of his spirit and the gradual insubordination of his physical being. He once faced down tempests, traversed desolate terrains, and endured sleepless nights. The world witnessed the heroic figures he embodied, the lawman, the frontiersman, the protector. What remained unseen was the individual who would limp back to his residence after a grueling 12-hour day on set. The man who meticulously bound his knees before remounting a horse. The man who endured physical torment not for outward vanity, but in pursuit of authentic representation. Each triumph left its indelible mark. Waterworld inflicted burns and nearly led to his drowning. In open range, a horse threw him, resulting in a fractured rib. The filming of Hidden Figures subjected him to the acute, relentless agony of kidney stones, pain so intense that despite potent medication, he adamantly refused to miss a single day of production. Perhaps, he once mused, the anger conveyed in that particular scene stemmed from a genuine emotional source. Indeed it did. Every scene, every exhalation was acquired through a cost of suffering. Today, at 70 years of age, the physique that propelled him through 1,000 challenges now bears the quiet recompense of that unwavering dedication. The shoulders that once lifted fellow actors now ache in the biting cold. The back that braced against simulated explosions vividly recalls every fall, every arduous hour spent beneath an unyielding sun. His hands, once so remarkably steady, now exhibit a slight tremor when the mountain wind sweeps through aspen. Medical professionals attribute these ailments to wear and tear. He, however, perceives them as irrefutable evidence. "Pain," he once articulated, "is not my adversary. It serves as a constant reminder that I am still vibrantly alive, pursuing the activities I cherish." His movements have become more deliberate, yet a distinct purpose imbues each action. He awakens prior to the break of dawn, a ritual he has maintained for the past 40 years, stepping out into the crisp Colorado air as the initial rays of sunlight begin to illuminate the undulating landscape. At the Dunar Ranch, he traverses the very same pathways he once walked with his children, the past made tangible by the frost beneath his feet. At times, he attends to the horses personally, their breath forming misty plumes in the frigid atmosphere. His back protests, his knees voice their objections, yet he persists in his movement. Motion, he asserts, is what sustains my vitality. While the physical form may falter, the heart, that enduring engine, continues to burn with fervent intensity. Even now, as the demanding production of Horizon necessitates prolonged days under a harsh sun, he steadfastly refuses to succumb to the allure of ease. Members of the crew attest that he labors with greater intensity than individuals half his age. He directs, acts, edits, and negotiates, all the while managing the subtle tremors of time that traverse his frame. During breaks, he sits in quiet contemplation, his gaze fixed upon the expansive landscape, the distant horizon stretching forth like an unfulfilled yet deeply held promise. One cannot feign the authenticity reflected in a man's eyes, he once remarked, and his retain their luminosity, tinged with weariness but undeniably unbroken. Time has levied its inevitable toll, diminishing the vigor of youth, the swiftness of recuperation, and the illusion of invincibility. What it has bestowed in its wake is far more precious: grace. The grace of acknowledging one's limitations and deliberately choosing to transcend them. The grace of transmuting pain into a form of prayer. There are days when the persistent ache lingers excessively, when his back stiffens and the memories of Waterworld and hidden figures resurface like spectral specters of the past. Yet he refrains from complaint. He embraces the pain, gently integrates it into his creative endeavors, and allows it to become an intrinsic component of the narrative. For the countless individuals observing from afar, fans who themselves have aged, their hair now grayer, their movements slower, there is a profound sense of sanctity in witnessing him still rise, still ride, still uphold his convictions. He has become a reflection for all who awaken feeling stiff and fatigued, yet consciously choose to persevere regardless. His physical form may bear the remnants of accumulated years, but his very presence embodies their redemption. In this regard, he has transcended the role of mere actor. He stands as a living testament to endurance itself. Those intimately acquainted with him describe a serene scene. Late evening in Aspen, the sky ablaze with a golden hue. Kevin stands by the fence, observing the horses grazing peacefully. His hands rest upon the railing, the veins prominent, the lines deeply etched. He inhales slowly, as if imprinting the fleeting light upon his memory. Behind him lies a lifetime of weathered storms. Before him, another horizon awaits. He acknowledges that his physical being will not endure indefinitely. No one's does. However, the stories, the unwavering faith, the profound love, the sheer grit, these elements will persist. "Perhaps I have slowed my pace," he once confessed with a gentle smile. "But I have not ceased." And herein lies Kevin Costner's ultimate masterpiece, not the films he has created nor the acclaim he has garnered, but his resolute refusal to capitulate to the relentless march of time. He represents all those who have aged with wisdom rather than emptiness, all whose bodies may have betrayed them, yet whose hearts continue to possess the capacity for resilience. He is living proof that even as physical strength diminishes, profound meaning can still ignite, and that every wrinkle, every scar, every ache serves merely as life's way of affirming you are still present. Continue your journey. Currently at 70 years of age, Kevin Costner stands as living testament to the enduring nature of dreams, which merely evolve into different forms rather than vanishing entirely. He was born into a humble dwelling in Linwood, California, the son of a trench digger and a social worker, and now surveys vast empires meticulously constructed by his own endeavors. His net worth, exceeding $250 million, stands not as a monument to avarice, but as a profound declaration of perseverance. The boy who once relocated from one municipality to another, sleeping amidst stacked boxes, now presides over sprawling landscapes that evoke the very essence of America, boundless, untamed, and magnificent. His Dunar Ranch in Aspen, Colorado, is the kind of locale one typically encounters only in the realm of imagination. Spanning 160 acres of secluded mountain terrain, the air here resonates with the fragrance of pine and a palpable sense of tranquility. Valued at nearly $250 million, it is more than just a residence. It is a living testament to unwavering resolve. The estate comprises 3 distinct dwelling places: a primary lodge crafted from timber and glass, where the morning sun inundates every interior space with a luminous grace; a lakeside house designed for quiet contemplation during the early hours; and a riverside dwelling where the soothing cadence of flowing water mimics the rhythm of a heartbeat. Throughout the property, one discovers a private baseball field where his children once engaged in play under the Colorado sky, an ice skating rink, and meandering trails winding through rustling forests. During winter evenings, the falling snow catches the illumination from the fireplaces, transforming the entire valley into a golden tableau. It is an embodiment of beauty devoid of ostentation, a luxurious tapestry interwoven with cherished memories. Further to the west, perched upon the golden bluffs of Santa Barbara, lies his Flint Ridge estate, a Tuscan architectural marvel estimated to be worth close to $60 million, offering breathtaking vistas of the Pacific Ocean. Its terracotta arches open into courtyards redolent with the scent of lavender, while Italian frescoes and Murano glass chandeliers cast an antique luminescence throughout its halls. Beneath its floors lies an extensive wine cellar, housing 1,000 bottles, each vintage meticulously catalogued with its accompanying narrative, every cork representing a year triumphantly endured. The estate's library, private cinema, and stone terraces are strategically positioned to capture sunsets that appear as if painted by divine hands. Here, Costner discovers equilibrium between the grandeur of existence and the understated virtue of gratitude. He navigates these disparate realms with the same humble spirit that once propelled him from the precipice of obscurity. His collection of automobiles functions less as a display of possessions and more as a chronicle of his life's journey. The 1968 Shelby GT35DH, a black and gold muscle car exuding an aura of defiance, a Land Rover Defender 90 still bearing the residual dust from various film locations, a Toyota Tundra, his dependable workhorse on the ranch, and an Audi S8, a sleek, silent vehicle reserved for excursions along Highway 1 at dawn. His friends reveal that he also maintains a classic Harley-Davidson for the rare occasions when he seeks profound silence, and a vintage wooden boat docked near Santa Barbara, which he pilots solo when the sea offers a gentler disposition than the bustling city. Yet despite possessing all these material comforts, his defining characteristic is not what he owns, but rather what he bestows. He has channeled millions into philanthropic endeavors that hold deep personal significance, including research for Parkinson's disease, financial support for children's hospitals, assistance for women's shelters, and aid for first responders. He has hosted numerous charity events at his own residence, orchestrating auctions for private stays at Dunar Ranch to generate funds for those less fortunate. Money, he once stated, is not success. It is a tool, and tools are meant for the construction of something meaningful. Between the serene stillness of Aspen and the sun-drenched landscapes of California, Kevin divides his existence among the fundamental elements that have always held true significance, his artistic vocation, his cherished family, and the ever-present horizon. There is no nascent romance or public scandal to report, only a man who has found peace with the challenges he has successfully navigated. He is the father of 7 children, Annie, Lily, and Joe, from his initial marriage, Liam from a subsequent relationship, and Caden, Hayes, and Grace from his most recent union. Each child carries a distinct echo of his life's trajectory, a fragment of his very essence manifested in human form. Annie, the eldest, born in 1984, has closely followed in his professional footsteps. As a film producer and the head of her own company, Fierce Studios, she subtly embodies her father's innate talent for storytelling and his independent spirit. Lily, born in 1986, inherited his artistic sensibility. She is a singer-songwriter renowned for her ethereal and haunting voice. She frequently performs at intimate charity functions, occasionally sharing the stage with her father, though she often remains in the background of the audience, a proud yet inconspicuous observer. Joe, born in 1988, also found his niche within the film industry, contributing his skills behind the camera in production and sound, representing a generation that carries forward Kevin's dedication to artistic craft over mere celebrity. Liam, born in 1996, largely maintains a private existence away from public scrutiny, embodying the more reserved nature of the family. However, those close to Kevin indicate that the bond between them has only deepened with the passage of time, founded upon silent comprehension and mutual esteem. Then come the 3 youngest, Caden, born in 2007, Hayes, born in 2009, and Grace, born in 2010. Still in their teenage years, they are experiencing the idyllic childhood that Kevin had once aspired to provide for his elder offspring. Caden has begun to express interest in music and editing. Hayes is an accomplished equestrian and has made a brief on-screen appearance alongside his father in Horizon, while Grace serves as the radiant heart of the family. Possessing athletic prowess, a keen sense of humor, and an unwavering protectiveness towards her father, they visit frequently. Sometimes their visits involve riding horses through the expansive valleys of Aspen, and other times they gather in his private screening room in Santa Barbara, where vintage home movies flicker across the wall. These occasions, marked by birthdays, Christmas mornings, and the sight of younger faces with the same familiar smiles, fill the house with the joyous sound of their laughter, momentarily bending the fabric of time backward. "All family," he states quietly, observing them, "is not a mere chapter. It constitutes the entirety of the narrative, and I am still actively engaged in its composition." He coexists with the lingering echoes of past pain, the discomfort of an aching back from falls sustained on set, the lingering shadows of kidney stone episodes, and the pervasive fatigue accumulated over decades of sleepless nights, yet the internal fire remains undimmed. He continues to awaken before the sun, to write, to direct, and to dream. His current undertaking, Horizon, an epic American saga, a monumental western for which he risked his entire fortune to realize, is no longer driven by a quest for glory. It is fueled by the imperative to finalize what he initiated, to leave behind a legacy forged from truth, sacrifice, and the indelible passage of time. When questioned about his legacy, he emits a soft chuckle. "I have no need for statues," he declares. "My legacy is the life I have lived and the individuals I have cherished." Beyond the accolades and the amassed fortune, the spirit of the boy who held the profound belief that stories possessed the power to transform the world still resides within him. He is now living testament to that very truth. To the wider world, Kevin Costner is an undeniable icon of Hollywood. However, to those who truly perceive, he represents a profound parable, a poignant reminder that hardship is not the antithesis of grace, but rather its indispensable gateway. His life serves as an instruction that dreams are not fashioned from comfort, but from unyielding perseverance. It teaches that pain serves as a refining agent, and that genuine faith, as opposed to superficial fame, constitutes the true currency of a life fully realized. Therefore, tonight, regardless of your current circumstances, whether in the quiet solitude of your home, an empty room, or the gentle twilight of your advancing years, allow Kevin's story to resonate with you, conveying the vital message that it is never too late to reconstruct, never too late to offer forgiveness, and never too late to embark on a new beginning. If a young boy from Linwood could ascend from humble beginnings, transitioning from mere cardboard boxes to magnificent castles nestled within the mountains, then indeed there remains a beacon of hope for every single one of us. The capacity exists to transform our wounds into wisdom and our struggles into illuminating experiences. If this narrative has deeply touched your heart, please leave a tribute below, or simply express your gratitude for the man who consistently stood tall. And wherever life finds you this evening, may you be imbued with abundant health, profound peace, enduring love, and boundless prosperity. Because, as Kevin Costner has so eloquently demonstrated, a life of true richness is not measured by the extent of our possessions, but rather by the trials we overcome, the contributions we make, and the enduring love we impart.